The tobacco industry employed more dirty tricks to hide the dangers of their product than almost any other industry. They were the propaganda specialist. And now the energy industry has decided that the best way to be successful is to take a page out of Big Tobacco's playbook. I have Howard Nations with me now to talk about the energy industry and what they're up to all over the world. Howard, it appears that the tobacco industry has taken everything they learned about how to hustle America and how to hustle the world, and now they've implanted it. They've given that information to the energy industry, and now there's a big hustle going on by them. There's an article by Michael Clare. He's author of The Race for What's Left. Interesting article where he talks about how the energy industry is now finding that common ground on how to hustle the world. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, this is nothing new to us, Mike. What happened is the tobacco industry in the United States and in Europe met regulatory restrictions. They had the litigations, and they decided that what they need to do is to sell more in developing nations where they do not have regulations, they don't have a threat of litigation, but the demand is strong. The result of that, incidentally, according to the World Health Organization, is that by 2030, there will be 8 million people per year dying as a result of smoking illnesses worldwide. So that's where we start.
So the tobacco industry left developed countries, and then they went to developing third world countries,
right,
primarily Southeast Asia, places like that, and started killing them by the millions there because it's all about how much money they can make. It doesn't really have anything to do with how many people they kill. And now we're seeing the energy industry do the same thing. The climate change issue has become an incredible problem for the energy industry. So now we see them making this twist to the third world country too, right?
Yes, and this is nothing new for us. As attorneys, we see this happen. I recall very well when the energy industry was making pesticides that were banned in the United States. But the same pesticides, after being banned here, would be sold in Costa Rica, where they would be sprayed on the grapes. The grapes, in turn, are sold in the United States. We called it the circle of poison. They had no compunction about that. Those same energy companies today, as the climate change regulations begin to take hold in the West and in Europe, are getting a declining demand for fossil fuels. So they're doing the same thing the tobacco industry did. They're accelerating their sales in developing nations where the demand is strong, regulations are none or weak, and they have absolutely no concern regarding the huge increase in climate-altering carbon emissions, the same as the tobacco company just totally lacked concern for smoke-related injuries and deaths.
So it doesn't make any difference to these executives for the energy industry, whether it's Exxon or the Coke industry, whatever. It makes no difference to them. That the net effect is they're going to continue to accelerate climate change. It doesn't make any difference that it's going to affect their children and their grandchildren, as long as they can make as much as possible right now. Hell with the next generation. They're just going to pull it off in third world countries. That's kind of what their attitude now is, isn't it?
Yes, the New York Times reported that the industry is now spending billions of dollars in advertising and marketing and moving into third world nations. And the fossil fuel industry with oil and coal and natural gas is expanding exponentially. They're ensuring the growth of energy in these developing nations where they're unregulated. And it's gotten to the
talk
point.
About that. Talk about the fact that they're unregulated allows them to spread bribe money around to public officials, and they get away with a lot more in these third world countries. That's what we saw with tobacco. That's what we see with the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry can kill people by the thousands over here with one of their drugs. It's taken off the market here, and they simply take that same killer drug to a third world country, and they bribe their way in to be able to sell it. And that's what we saw the tobacco industry doing. Now we're seeing that with the energy industry, basically, aren't we?
And this is such an incredible marketplace for them because 95% of the projected growth in industry, in the economic energy consumption, is in developing nations, 95%. So they are in there just en masse, and they are doing exactly that. Now, you want to hear the ultimate hypocrisy. The CEO of Exxon says that there is a humanitarian imperative that they should deliver. I know, seriously. There's a humanitarian imperative that they should deliver this energy to these developing nations because they need it a lot more than they need to be able to breathe.
Yes, and this great humanitarian Tillerson is the same guy. He was the CEO who said, look, I don't mind you fracking everywhere else, companies, but don't frack in my backyard. He was the one that defends fracking, except he doesn't want them fracking in his backyard because he knows the fracking poisons his water, does a whole litany of destructive kind of things to the neighborhood. But this is the guy who says, this great humanitarian, we have to go to Southeast Asia, build refineries. They're building refineries by the dozens, aren't they?
They really are, and they're cooperating with the countries themselves. They have big deals going in China and in Singapore and in Qatar and all over the world, literally, but mainly it's in Southeast Asia where they have increased not only the oil and gas and liquefied natural gas, but also coal has moved heavily into China. Go ahead.
You know what's interesting about it, Howard, is the Koch brothers' father, these billionaire inheritance babies, David and Charles Koch, made all their money from Daddy. Daddy made his money by going to the USSR when it was communist Russia and making a deal with Stalin, the same kind of deal. It let us build you refineries, and they actually put Russia into the refinery business. The Koch brothers did that. So I'm sure they're comfortable doing that with China or whoever may one day be pointing bombs our way. They don't have any problems with that, I'm certain.
Yeah, they have absolutely no problems because they've gone, for example, just take coal, for example. In 2007, there was no U.S. coal in exports to China. There were 7 million tons in 2012. The exports to India, China, South Korea have increased by 1,000%. That's just coal, not to mention all the other energy sources that are being funded straight into China. And as you diminish carbon emissions in the U.S., as Obama has stated, he brags about diminishing carbon emissions in the U.S., but the long-term overall impact is you have the same emissions in Asia, which contribute to a thing called the global climate.
And all he has to do, frankly, is take their government contracts away from them, hit them with a punitive tax. He could take their subsidies away from them. He could stop this. This Congress could stop this by punishing these basically corporate criminals who understand that they are melting this planet. They're just not doing it in the U.S. now. They've moved to third world countries, and they understand what this is going to do to their children and their children's children. Howard Nations, ugly as it can be, it is a real story out there. Thank you for joining me.